Packer.
Hi, I'm Kate
Champy.
Miller.
Yes, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. What a beautiful place it is up here. I've never been to Brookfield.
Hi, Brian Robisheau.
And you paved,
Not many people have
well,
been.
you paved the road just for me. I'm so happy. It's a lovely ride. Thank the
But
state.
on your way home, you can't tell anybody that we're here.
Right, your
It's a
secret
secret.
is safe with
Yeah.
me, especially that road. Oh my goodness, it's wonderful.
So what we're gonna do tonight is we're gonna open the meeting, we salute the flag, and then we're gonna ask you to talk to us.
Chat, okay.
Chat.
All right.
What's doing?
And we're gonna, if you don't mind, we're gonna have you sit right up front, because that chair is gonna be empty.
Okay,
And then we get you on tape.
golly.
All right.
Only for him.
That's up to you. She's going like crazy. Wasn't a bad drive up, was it?
Oh, it's beautiful. I keep forgetting that there's that awful mess coming out of Portsmouth on Sullivan Bridge.
We were chatting about that.
Oh, Lord.
Is that the way you went over that bridge?
Yeah, I should have come up 125 because I came from Exeter, but I
That's-
wasn't thinking. It was
When
a
we go
mess.
to Exeter, it's a toss-up. Do you go 101 or do you go 108 or 101 or 108?
Well, either one of those would be better coming on.
That bridge,
That bridge is just a bottleneck. I know eventually it'll be finished and there'll be enough lanes, but right now it's just such a squeeze.
okay.
So it did say 5. Okay, move again. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So as the public should know, we received a request to renew our franchise agreement for the cable system in town. And we read the board read the request, the agreement, recognized that we were in a different league. So we thought it would be good to get some help. Ed Comeau suggested we watch the tape from Tamworth. So we watched the tape from Tamworth, and Attorney Miller did a presentation there describing to the town what opportunities might exist. I said, excellent, I wonder if you could come and tell our town what opportunities might exist. So with that background, this is Attorney Kate Miller from DTC.
DTC lawyers, yes.
Lawyers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're the official person. Thank you. And so watch my cord over here so you can get it. Great, thank you. Well, thanks very much. I know that one of the questions that had come up when you and I were speaking on the phone was whether or not anyone can locate the current franchise agreement for the town. Has Charter been able to come up with a franchise agreement?
Well, two things happened the same moments apart.
Okay,
Laurie, our administrative assistant, asked for a copy of the franchise
yeah,
so that it would be easy for us to go forward.
yeah.
And Brian said, hey, this is a pretty complicated agreement, we're going to ask for some lawyers to look at it. That stopped everything, we think. We got nothing back. Before that, they were pretty aggressive with us.
Oh, yeah.
You have to sign, you have to sign,
Emails.
you have to sign, you met, did you sign?
Well, the issue is that in both federal law and state law require that if a cable company is going to operate in a community, cable TV by its nature requires cables to be strung up on utility poles to reach every house. So unlike a wireless system or a satellite system, it is that services are delivered by cable. Often now it's a combination of a wire and a fiber, but basically it's a physical connection. And the law requires that every company who's going to provide those kinds of services in a community needs to get a franchise from the town, and there needs to be a written franchise agreement. that I believe your company has had quite a number of entities. I think you had Adelphia, was that correct?
Yes.
And they went bankrupt and transferred to Time Warner, which has subsequently merged with Charter. So I'm guessing that somewhere along the line there is an Adelphia franchise agreement, or possibly one that was renewed with Time Warner at some point. But that's really the first step, is to see what they might have in the way of a document. If they don't have a franchise agreement, then in some ways it provides the town with opportunities, because you're starting fresh in terms of there isn't an existing agreement. They do not have a status of being a current cable operator with a franchise agreement in the town. Now, I'm imagining that folks are going to want to have a cable company here providing cable TV services. Not only does the cable company provide television services, but it also provides often internet service and voice services. And folks can sometimes get a triple play or combined package with all of those things. Because of the history of the development of the cable laws and the cable industry, the Board of Selectmen have jurisdiction over the cable franchise and negotiating that with the cable company. The other parts of their business, which may come through the same facilities, they may come over the same coaxial cable or over the same fiber, are, if they're internet service, they're very lightly regulated. There's very little regulation of internet service at this point. The Federal Trade Commission does some consumer protection regulation, but the Federal Communications Commission has basically kept its hands off, changed a policy that was adopted a few years ago. So they have backed off. So there's very little regulation. So in terms of broadband and internet services, technically the Board of Selectmen don't have any jurisdiction over that. And it's the same thing with telephone services. That's regulated to some extent by our Public Utilities Commission and to some extent by the Federal Communications Commission. But that also is pretty lightly regulated. A few years ago, the legislature passed a deregulation bill for telephone, the so-called incumbent telephone companies that are the wireline operators. So those are regulated a little bit differently. The cable TV portion is what's under your jurisdiction. It's a hard thing to keep in mind because it all comes over the same facilities. It comes into your house the same way. You get one bill from the company, but you get often 3 different kinds of services. So in negotiating a cable television contract, because the facilities provide the other services too, you're also negotiating the opportunity for internet service and telephone service to be offered over those facilities. Who is your telephone company in town? Do you have Fairpoint Consolidated?
Yes, Consolidated.
Communications, okay. They may also provide internet service, and I don't know if folks are getting broadband or internet service through Consolidated Communications.
Just DSL.
DSL, okay. And have folks found that that's been adequate for viewing videos and things like that, or is it not really up to?
Some people can't get it.
Some people don't get it at all.
Can't even get DSL,
Yeah.
and it's pretty
Yeah.
slow.
Yeah, that's a real challenge because now everything is done over the internet. Education, I don't know about your school systems, but I know in our district I used to think that internet stuff was kind of an add-on, but in fact it's actually a component of the instruction now. Students are expected to watch videos, the report cards go out by email. I mean, there are many changes in those sort of fundamentals, and it also is important for businesses. New Hampshire has a lot of home businesses, and certainly a place like Brookfield is a beautiful place to live and work remotely, whether you commute some days or no days and are able to work from your home. That can provide a lot of economic development to the town if people are able to work remotely. That's only possible with some sort of a decent high-speed internet service. So it's really becoming a very important sort of link to everything, right up there with electricity in terms of how important it is in our lives. So you can, as you're negotiating on the cable franchise, in some ways that may bring internet service into some parts of the community. How well is the community served by Charter spectrum at this point? Do most homes have access to cable TV, or does it not reach very many places?
It reaches most. There are some outliers that,
Yeah.
also further down on the lines, your signal gets slower. But
Yeah.
there are at least a couple dozen houses, would you say?
Well, Route 109 is main road.
Yeah,
From the Red Barn down, doesn't
that's what I'm
doesn't
picturing. That's why I was
much.
picturing a couple.
So you got the development of Drew Farm, you got 109,
Yeah,
you've got Pinkham Road, you got most of that part of the town.
Yeah,
I guess it's
okay.
more than a couple dozen, but
okay. So some coverage, but some areas not covered.
They
So,
just stopped,
yeah.
it's like they just stopped deploying.
yeah, they have a pretty high threshold for extending cable services to areas that are not served. And one of the challenges is that when the cable laws were written in the 80s and 90s, the expectation was that there would be lots of small cable companies sprouting up and serving communities, so you'd have a lot of choice, and people would have the ability to pick different cable companies and choose who they wanted, and the market would sort of regulate service and price, and there would be a lot of competition. Well, over the last 30 years, exactly the opposite has happened, with fewer and fewer companies providing cable TV services and having it being more and more consolidated. You've seen it just with your franchise. You know, it went from a family-owned company to Time Warner, and then Time Warner merged with Charter. So it has become very consolidated, and because of the cost for cable companies to put up their facilities on telephone poles, there has been almost no competition in smaller towns. Some cities, bigger cities, will have more than one cable operator. But most small towns, which is most of New Hampshire, and even the cities in New Hampshire, have only one cable operator. So what was anticipated when Congress passed the laws to be a very rich, competitive environment has turned out to be very different from that. So what we have are what are essentially economic monopolies. The cable companies cannot, by law, get an exclusive franchise. So if we ever track down your franchise agreement, I'm sure it is not an exclusive franchise agreement. If someone else came along and said, we'd like to put up a cable system in your town, you'd probably be very happy to talk to them. So the franchise agreements are not exclusive, but as a practical matter, it's so expensive now to get up on telephone poles, and the cost of deploying what's usually fiber at this point rather than coaxial cable is so high that many companies are unwilling to make the initial investment and then have to try to lure away customers from the existing cable company. So that has just been such a difficult challenge to meet, that most cable companies do not compete head-to-head in communities with an existing cable operator. What's happening as video services over the internet evolve is that more and more video content, which is like the TV we used to watch on our televisions, is coming through the internet. So there's more and more video content through Hulu and Amazon and Apple TV and all these other folks, which you need a high-speed internet connection to be able to enjoy. So it still is tied to having a good high-speed internet service. But people do, if they have that option, do have some choice now between what a cable company might offer versus what they might be able to watch on the internet using one of those other streaming services, Netflix and stuff like that. So it's an interesting time, because there was this very monolithic time when all the cable companies were pretty much monopolies within their own areas. Now what's eroding their business share really is the internet, but they often control the internet because they provide the high-speed internet service. So many of the cable companies are looking very obviously in the franchise agreements that they propose to protect their ability to stay on the poles in your public right-of-way, even if their cable franchise goes away and they stop providing cable TV. That's one of the things that I've been very watchful in looking at franchise agreements, because our New Hampshire laws, you know that if people want to stick a telephone pole or a conduit in your public right-of-way, there's a process by which they seek permission from the town to get a license to put those poles and conduits in the public right-of-way. So we have a statute that basically says that's public property. You need to go to the Board of Selectmen, or you may have a road agent or somebody who works on that with you, that looks at the safety, looks at, is it going to be a good place in terms of plowing, make sure that it's going to be properly maintained, we hope, and stuff like that. And then you can grant a license. So the cable TV company is the same way. They need to come and get a franchise agreement in order to be in your public right-of-way and get permission to get up on the poles. So that's kind of a long background to where we are. If there's no franchise agreement and they cannot produce one, then you're in a stronger position because you're negotiating, fresh in terms of, where you would like the cable company to go. There still is a challenge because they have their economic model in terms of where it is feasible for them to build out their system. And they often have a 25 homes per mile density requirement, which in our rural communities often is prohibitive because you don't have 25 homes per mile. So that can really be a challenge. And that may be an opportunity to have some conversation about, okay, how can we figure out a way to do this in terms of getting the company to try to build out to areas that aren't served. And certainly if you've got some pockets of potential customers in developments and things like that, there may be a way to figure out how to do that. It used to be in the good old days when cable companies were young that they provided a lot of free benefits to communities in order to win those franchises and be able to provide service there. The time of getting free stuff from the cable company is pretty much over. And one of the challenges is that discussions about internet service, even though it comes through the same pipe, are verboten when we're talking about the cable TV franchise, because the only thing that the town has jurisdiction over is the cable TV part. So because the services all come together, extension of the cable plant means extension of the same system that provides internet service. So basically they're looking for cable TV customers, and we need to be able to verify that there are folks out there that are willing to subscribe.
Oh, they're looking for TV customers,
Correct.
not internet customers.
That's exactly right. All of our conversation and the document that will come out of this, if there's something that's signed, will be all about the cable TV services and nothing about internet service. And I understand why they do this. They're not required to get permission from the town on anything having to do with internet service. I had one community say, well, we think that those net neutrality rules were a really good idea, so we want to put into our amendment to our Comcast franchise that they're going to abide by the net neutrality rules that have been repealed by the FCC. And I said, Comcast won't agree to that because it's internet matters and they have no obligation to negotiate that with the town, and they won't because they basically don't want to have a patchwork of different regulations for their internet service all over the country. So I can get in touch with your representative. It's probably Shelley Winchenbach, who covers everything from Rockland, Maine to Lake Champlain, from what I can tell. She covers all of that part of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. So I can check with her and see what she's got in the way of a franchise agreement.
And so she's the representative for our Spectrum?
She is.
Okay.
She used to be Time Warner, and she's now there doing it for Spectrum, so I can touch base with her.
I think that's the name I saw in some of the email.
Yeah. And they are pretty aggressive. So I think the first thing to think about is, can we pin down a franchise agreement? And secondly, if there is one, it's a good idea to do an audit to figure out if they're complying with the terms of the franchise agreement, whatever it is. Are you aware of whether or not the town has required that the cable company pay franchise fees to the town? Do you get a payment?
No,
You
we
don't?
do not charge
Okay.
that.
So that's one thing that they wouldn't have to have complied with. There might not be a lot to look at, but it's always a good idea to see if there are some areas where they're not in compliance with what they're supposed to be doing. So it's a good idea to do some due diligence and review the agreement. Often we'll send some questions to the representative for the cable company and say, can you please tell us if these things have happened, or show us copies of these documents, insurance certificates and things like that. And I usually ask the town to do the same thing, to try to the extent that the town has information, look at town records and things like that to see if it matches up. If there are areas of non-compliance, that's a time to get the company to fix it. And if they can't fix it, then there's potentially some leverage there. It's rare that we find something that's not in compliance, but when we do, it's an opportunity for the town to negotiate for something it might not otherwise have been able to negotiate for.
So non-compliant issues might be coverage on a certain road, or is it?
Well, it depends, yeah, it might be their density, if they're supposed to have built out to a certain area, it could be that. If they're not in, they don't have insurance certificates or other things, as I said, it's unlikely, but it does happen. And there are times when, particularly if there was supposed to be a build out to a particular area, that's an opportunity to kind of put some pressure on to make sure that those things happen, or trade it out for something that the town would prefer to have.
Now, what does your firm do? What would you do to help us?
So
If we were to engage with
I've
you?
got a little graphic here, which is
Okay.
sort of the kind of full-blown process. And one thing to think about is there are a number of towns that I'm working with. Ossipee, I've talked with Tamworth, and I'm working with 7 towns up in the profile region now. And there's strength in numbers in both ways. If anyone else wants to look at our pictures, you're welcome to. Because you have the same cable company in all those towns, it may be possible to develop kind of a basic document that works for everything, and then can be customized a little bit between the towns. So working together and doing things as a group can sometimes give you some cost saving. So what I propose would be to first try to see if there's a franchise agreement and talk to Shelley to see if she can find one. I don't have one in my office. We have a copy of some franchise agreements for towns. Mostly they're ones that we've represented in the past, and I don't think we've worked with Brookfield in the past, so I don't happen to have one.
Years ago, I tried to have cable put into my
Yep.
house. And the installer came out,
Mhm.
checked it out, and said, I gotta go back to the office to check the agreement. He called me up and says, you guys don't have one.
And when was that?
That was 6 years ago, 5 years
It's
ago.
amazing.
You don't have one.
That's amazing.
So wherever he looked,
So, yeah, well, it can happen that there isn't an agreement. That doesn't mean there never was one, but if no one can lay their hands on it, it doesn't exist. So that'll be interesting to see. So I
Okay.
think that's your first step, and then that will tell you whether you're negotiating on a clean slate versus doing a renewal negotiation. When towns renew their cable TV franchise, the deck is stacked very much in favor of the cable company, as if you didn't think it already was kind of stacked in their favor. The law says that the only grounds for a town to deny renewal of a cable franchise to a company is if either the proposal is unreasonable, and part of the test for what's reasonable or unreasonable is the economic cost. So if Brookfield would like every house in town to receive cable TV service if they want it, and that the company would install that without charge to the town or to the subscribers, that could be $100,000, $200,000 to do that. And if that doesn't match the return on investment that the company has as part of its business plan, that is deemed not to be reasonable. So the company gets to essentially define what's reasonable or unreasonable from an economic perspective. So the town's at a disadvantage there. The other thing that often puts the town at a disadvantage is that if the cable company offers the same not very generous proposal for renewing the franchise to this town that it offers to many other towns, then it's deemed to be reasonable because it's the standard proposal. So if it's not a generous proposal to every town, then that must be reasonable. If you don't have a franchise agreement, then they have been operating in contravention of both federal and state law for as many years as they've been operating without a franchise agreement. So that gives you some leverage to say, okay, if you want to cure your past behavior that's not been in compliance with the law, this is what we would like. So you have a little bit more leverage if they're in a position of having not had a franchise. If they had a franchise that was signed by the town in Adelphia in 1989 or 95 or something like that, and it had a 20-year term which has since expired, then the company is continuing to provide service under the terms of that old franchise agreement in a sort of holdover status. So they haven't lost the franchise. They're still offering service pursuant to the franchise because of that kind of holdover status. And it goes back to the idea that they can only be kicked out if their proposal is unreasonable or they're not in compliance with the terms of the franchise. So if there once was a franchise agreement and they're providing service pursuant to the terms of that old franchise, then they're in this holdover status. It's like a holdover tenant. As you know, with like landlord-tenant situations, you can't just necessarily, kick out a tenant after the lease expires. They may be in a holdover status. And if you continue to take rent from them, as the town has continued to allow them to provide service and not kick them out of the public right-of-way, that's a sort of tacit agreement that they can continue under the old agreement. So the first step is to figure out what set of facts are we dealing with? Are you clean slate where you've got more leverage? Do they not have a franchise agreement that gives you more leverage? Or are we looking to renew an old franchise? So I think that's the first step. We would do audit questions, looking at the franchise agreement and sending them to the cable company and sending them to you folks to take a look at too. What I'm trying to do is to come up with a good base document. I've done work with Charter in other parts of the state before they merged with Time Warner, and we had a very good base document that we worked on there, and I'm hoping to be able to use that one with Charter now that it's in this part of the state. Charter had a couple of franchises down in the southern edge of the state that kind of bled over the line from Massachusetts. So Hollis, Brookline, some small towns down there have charter franchises. So that's my approach, is to try to use an existing New Hampshire charter franchise agreement, not invent something from scratch, with the hope that that's going to be more palatable to the company. I always look in a franchise agreement to make sure that we've got some protections for the municipality, that you retain the ability to control the public right-of-way, including the ability to assess taxes for use of the public right-of-way. I don't know if Brookfield has been tagged by Fairpoint Consolidated Communications in the litigation over tax.
We're mixed up in that.
Okay, so as you now painfully know, the law in New Hampshire is that public right-of-way is public property, and use of it by utility companies that plant their poles in it or conduits in it means that their agreements need to be subject to tax. That's one thing that, even if you have a franchise agreement, I'm pretty sure is not in there, is the requirement that Charter pay tax for its use of the public right-of-way. Interestingly, as the legacy telephone company, now Consolidated Communications, its piece of the telecommunications business pie is shrinking as more people go to wireless. So the telephone company used to be kind of the big cheese in the right-of-way. They owned a lot of the poles, or they jointly owned them with the electric companies, and they still do maintain a lot of that joint ownership. But their revenue that they're getting from their telephone service is actually not the biggest revenue that's generated out of the public right-of-way. A lot of people's cable TV bills are pretty high. So some folks get a sort of modest basic package, and some folks get, all the bells and whistles, and with equipment fees, it could be $200 a month. So that's often a lot more than you're paying for your telephone service. So there's been kind of a shift in how is your public right-of-way being used by folks who are reaching customers to provide services to them. And the cable company is often making a lot more money than the other companies that are also in the public right-of-way. So that taxation piece is important. Fairpoint Consolidated Communications has been busy suing towns that don't have any taxation of the cable company. And if the language isn't in the cable agreement, it's an important thing to put in there. How you value it is up to your assessors in terms of how they figure out the various pieces of the assessment puzzle. But some look at the income that's coming from the use of the right-of-way, and it's actually a higher value for the cable company than the telephone company. So that would be the place to start, I would say, and looking to do kind of a template agreement. I'm mindful that you're a small town, and this can get very expensive. So I think a cost-saving way to approach it would be potentially to try to be part of a group of clients that are working together. The other option is to do kind of limited representation and kind of see where that goes. So one option is for me to start with negotiations with them, try to find the franchise agreement, do the audit questions, and then kind of see where that takes us. At some point, they do have kind of a heavy hammer they can bring down on the town. If they make a proposal for renewal of the franchise agreement and the town doesn't act on it, eventually they can impose one without negotiation.
Oh.
Yeah, there are many cards in their deck, and not very many in ours. So if they have an existing franchise, then they can force a renewal on their terms, and I can promise you it wouldn't have that, New Hampshire law language in it, and it would be less good for you. So there is a risk to doing nothing. So I think it makes sense to try to figure out a cost-effective way to do something. So doing either limited stuff on a sort of, what's the right word, a piece at a time. That's one way to go. I think it makes sense to explore working with other communities and sharing costs with Ossipee, and potentially Tamworth would want to join. I don't think you can join the 7 towns in the profile region because they have an intermunicipal agreement that makes it very difficult for new towns to join. But if I'm negotiating a base document for that group, it's the same base document I would be negotiating for this group. So there would be cost sharing among clients, whether you're part of an official group or not. I'm not a fan of billing people twice for the same work. So if I've come up with a base document that works for 3 towns or 10 towns, I'd split the time among those towns. My bookkeepers don't like it, but it's fair.
A couple of quick questions. Any opportunities to try to entice other companies to come to town?
You can certainly invite them. As I said, few have accepted that challenge because it's so expensive to get on the telephone poles. It used to be that the only folks on the poles were electric and telephone, and then cable arrived, and the pole owners didn't really charge a lot in the way of fees. It was easy to get on. You didn't have to move anything else around. Now there is more stuff on the poles, and those companies have realized that they can make a lot of money on their important real estate, which carries, broadband now as well as other types of things. So it's more expensive to get on the poles. You could certainly send a letter to Comcast. MetroCast was bought by Atlantic Broadband. Those are probably the likely folks in your area. I've heard through the grapevine that Comcast may be coming to Rochester, which would be kind of a big surprise because they've had MetroCast, which is now Atlantic Broadband, for a very long time. So there's no harm in asking. When I have sent such letters in the past, those companies have responded, "Thank you very much, but we have no interest in stepping into someone else's territory because of the cost." But there's no prohibition on them doing that.
So they don't just assume the usage of the strung lines, they would have to restring all poles?
So they can't use someone else's facilities.
Okay.
So if Comcast isn't in Brookfield, they'd have to put a new attachment on the pole.
Okay.
And this is I don't know if anyone cares, this is a map that's a little bit out of date because some of the names have changed, but what used to be Time Warner is this big blue area that's now Charter, and that's where you are. So there are some areas that are not too far away. You've got Atlantic Broadband that comes into your area. Comcast is further south. I don't think they're likely to come up that far, but if they're coming up to Rochester, then potentially. So
And what's in Wolfbrook? Because Wolfbrook comes to the other.
they have MetroCast, that's exactly right.
What's in Wakefield, MetroCast?
No, they have Charter, Time Warner.
Because the line stops at the town line.
Right.
MetroCast, they stop right at the town line.
Right.
They could continue to come in if they wanted to go on the pole.
And where they are in
Wolfbrook.
Okay, yes, so that's a possibility, Atlantic Broadband. And they're a new company, they just purchased by a Canadian company. I don't have a feel yet for their government representative in terms of what they're going to be interested in or not interested in, but that's...
We should write a letter asking them if they'd
Yeah.
be interested.
Yeah.
The other question I had is, and you talked about it, internet, it's almost like a utility today,
Oh, God, is it? Yes.
but it's
you're
not
right.
regulated.
It's not regulated at all.
Any discussion of trying to regulate that internet?
Well, that's what the FCC tried to do in 2015, the so-called open internet order. So that was going to say that the folks who control the pipe which is companies like Fairpoint, companies like Comcast. They control the physical facilities that allow internet service to get to people. That they could not throttle competitors. So if you have Comcast that provides TV service and Amazon TV or Netflix that provides other videos, they're in the same business. They want people to watch their stuff. So what Comcast essentially did was to say to Netflix, if you want lots of capacity on our pipe, you got to pay us more. So the FCC said, we're not going to allow paid prioritization because that means people are going to have to pay more in order to be allowed to get on this highway to get their services out. So no throttling, no slowing down. Throttling means closing down altogether and preventing somebody from getting onto the internet through your service. No paid prioritization and no slowing it down.
Well, where I was going was with the telephone companies were 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
The government forced or regulated that every home had to have a phone line.
That's exactly right. And that's what the FCC did, was it went back to Title II of the Communications Act, which is telephone service. It's a regulated utility. And basically the premise was, this is as important as the telephone service was in 1940. I mean, it probably is more important than the telephone service was in 1940. So the idea was, let's use the existing statute that we have that talks about how you regulate something like this in order to treat it like a utility. That was vehemently opposed by the companies. And
yes.
when the administration changed, the new head of the FCC repealed it, and those changes just went into effect, I think, last month. What's interesting is they were in effect for about 2 years, and I will observe the world did not end. If Comcast thought that the world would end with the open internet law, it didn't. I mean, everything just kept right on going. It worked fine. It wasn't as if that was an impossible system to work under. The new approach is that the Federal Trade Commission is in charge of regulating the internet from a consumer perspective. Now, that's not a bad thing because the FTC is a great agency. The problem is all consumer transactions is like this much. So if you add to that the internet, which is practically, this much itself, it's a huge load for one agency to be able to handle. The FCC, being the communications agency that only focuses on telecommunications, seemed like a better fit, but the current chair of the FCC has said, nope, we're not going to do it, we're leaving it to the FTC. So I think Congress seems to not be able to do much these days. So I think it'll be a while before Congress sort of wades in and says, this is the policy we want to establish, whatever it is.
Nothing local on state level?
Unfortunately, we don't have any jurisdiction local on the state level. As I said, the internet has grown as a mostly unregulated entity. It started with essentially Defense Department networks. And so it's been not something that has been subject to the kind of telecommunications control that telephone companies in the past have been. And if you think about it, our electrical companies are still very, very significantly regulated. And at this point, I would say internet service is right up there in terms of being as important as any other type of service. So cable television is not considered a utility, and neither is the internet, which is, both of those are somewhat ironic in my mind.
Does anyone know where the old Adelphia agreements would have gone?
So they should, my experience was that Adelphia didn't do a great job of maintaining its records. So what they were supposed to have done was to turn over everything when their stuff was sold in the bankruptcy process. But if they didn't do a good job of maintaining the records, then they might be hard to find. There is a state agency that is supposed to be maintaining all franchise agreements, so I can check with them and see if they've got it by any chance. But it's unlikely. I would be very surprised if there isn't an agreement somewhere, and if Charter isn't in this holdover status, which is not the best place for the town. That's not really where we want to be, but it would be pretty unusual for a cable company to be providing service. I've seen it a little bit in New Hampshire in sort of funky little pockets where there was an odd situation that happened, which is not the case of the Adelphia and Time Warner and Charter succession. So I'm thinking there probably is one. So I don't know what would fit your needs best. I don't know if you would like to try doing things for, a certain amount of tasks and see where that leads us, whether you'd like me to explore Tamworth and Ossipee sharing costs to bring the bill down a bit.
Now, I assume you charge hourly and have paralegal rates and
I do,
clerk
yep.
rates and whatnot?
That's right. And as I said, if I'm negotiating with charter, and they're not easy to negotiate with, that's one of the hard things, is that I can sometimes estimate my costs pretty good with Comcast because I've worked with them a lot, and they're pretty good. I mean, once we convince them, this is New Hampshire law, it's required to be in your agreement, they put it in. Other companies, it's like, you know, the French Revolution every single time. You have to convince them, this is the law in New Hampshire, it has to be in here, we don't like it, doesn't matter, it has to be in here, and we go around and around. So it's harder to estimate how long it's going to take with charter. My hourly rate is $190 an hour. This is a freebie for you, so you can enjoy not paying $190 an hour. I like to meet people face to face, so I get a sense of them and they get a sense of me, but then I can do a lot of stuff by telephone conference, including, you know, consultations with legal counsel if there were negotiating points that I needed to discuss with the select board. I can do, you know, if you have the ability to do a speakerphone in your meetings, I can be here in a selectmen's meeting if you'd like. The process does involve at the end a public hearing on whatever the proposal is for the town to adopt. And that's an opportunity for the public to, you know, weigh in, ask questions, understand it, etc. But it's ultimately the board that makes a decision in terms of voting on whether or not to adopt it. And I don't generally want any client to get to the point of having a public hearing if we don't have agreement by the cable company, because it's sort of a pointless exercise. So that public hearing may be a ways off. It could be 6 months, it could be 9 months, depending on how long a slog it is with negotiating the franchise. I have a pretty clear idea of exactly what should be in your franchise agreement that can be tweaked a little bit depending on your preferences about some items, but that's already in existence. It's really a question of persuading charter that they should accept something that's I think a balanced agreement that sort of balances municipal protections and the company's legal rights in a way that's fair.
I would think that our goals are similar to Tamworth and Ossipee, and maybe we differ a little bit on the density requirement. So I would be biased to see if we can't hook up with other towns if it's going to be the
Yeah,
same.
do a cost share that way.
And then maybe get into our own space with density or what's of interest to us.
Yeah, yep.
But we'd have to.
Okay, I can certainly let them know and see if they're interested. And then we can sort of join them, you know, wherever they are. Ossipee's been working for a while, but we've not made a huge amount of progress. And Tamworth is sort of on hold for now. They're deciding what they're going to do. So
So I guess what we have to do is digest this a little bit, discuss it, and then if we want to go forward, make a motion and get in touch with you.
right. And I'd be happy to talk about whatever fits for you, you know, in terms of if you wanted to do, you know, limited representation, and I would do, you know, these pieces of it or something like that. If you wanted to contact the folks at Atlantic Broadband, I can give you the contact information for the local guy who's not local to here. He's like in somewhere south of Boston.
But
And if you want the Comcast representative, I mean, it's probably Brian Christensen. I can give you his contact information too.
I think MetroCast is the one we're interested in, right?
Yeah.
They're just down the road.
Right.
And there's no competition because they wouldn't be coming over Charter's area.
That's right. The charter's refusing to build out to that area. So what you would end up doing is probably having a franchise agreement with Atlantic Broadband with the understanding that they weren't expected to cover the whole town. They're covering this run, you know, from Wolfboro. And you'd still need a franchise agreement, but it can be very similar to the, you know, the Wolfboro agreement. I don't feel like I need to creatively write every new agreement. We can use what's already there and already working.
Would that motivate Charter at all, or you?
It might. And if they're not on the polls, then they really can't complain very much. They've been very rigid about not wanting to go into less dense areas. The one place that we have had some success, I think this was in Holderness, was where there were some state highways that didn't have any service on them, like 3 or something like that. And then there were developments or big camps or, things like that that had a lot of density. The buzzword these days in terms of getting extension of a cable system or broadband is public-private partnership, which means the company kicks in some money, the town or the people involved kick in some money. If you decided you wanted to charge franchise fees, that's one way for the cable company to put some money into town coffers. If you establish a record that cable service throughout the town is important for economic development, for educational purposes, for property values, for people to be able to work from home, all these other important things, and kind of establish that that's an appropriate public purpose. Some towns have used the franchise fees to help pay for extending build-out. So the money is technically municipal funds, or the municipality is entitled to it if it puts it into the franchise agreement, but it is either held back or paid back to the cable company to do that extension. So it's not perfect, but sometimes, looking for a good solution or an adequate solution gets you some progress, whereas if you're trying to find something that's perfect, it's hard to get to.
Good,
So,
thank you.
all right.
What is the question here?
Thank you for coming, Kate, I appreciate that. I was at the workshop in Plymouth.
Oh, great,
So, yeah,
good,
great information.
wonderful.
So I hadn't even been thinking in terms of MetroCast, so thanks for bringing that up and considering. I'm in that void where they won't deliver cable, and it's on a state route. This road right here, Route 109. And that would be great if we could get. I don't care about TV. It's been so long since I've had TV. It doesn't matter to me. What I really want is internet access, and I think that that's important for a lot of folks. And in fact, my next door neighbor's house is for sale, and a couple of people walked away when they found out that there wasn't internet access, or adequate internet access. So I have another question, or a question related to extending service. Several years ago, Fairpoint put in a fiber optics line along 109 between Wakefield and Wolfboro, and I got really excited, and I ran out and I asked them, when can I tap into the fiber optic? And I thought this was going to be great. And they said, no, you can't do that. Well, one of the things I learned at that workshop is that there's a tremendous amount of capacity, typically, when those are installed.
Oh, yes.
And I'm wondering if that might not be another opportunity. Is that even remotely possible or worth talking to Consolidated?
I would certainly talk with them. It's been frustrating in a number of communities where there has been capacity, but they either don't have the right type of, set up for connections so that they can deliver retail service right off that larger fiber cable. It's definitely worth talking to folks because it's great to have an option for internet service, and it's really good to have more than one option.
Is that best coming from the governing board or private citizens, or does it?
It could be either one. I mean, the more the better, and the higher the level of, sort of authority is probably good too. And they have a sort of PR representative, and they also have folks who, are the line people who will often give you the skinny in terms of what's really going on. They may have been the ones that told you they weren't going to be set up to do retail service from there. So Ellen Scarponi is their public relations person. And I think if you had a bunch of folks who are interested, if you've got some people who need to operate home businesses or things like that along what is a state route, it might be worthwhile to have her come up and talk to the select board and see if there's some way to try to, get that capacity to people's homes.
So, sorry, a couple more questions. I understand from what was said this evening, and I've heard a little bit from others in town, that even the internet service that is available isn't always so great.
It depends on how far from the node a particular person is. So the power diminishes the farther you get.
So, I guess my concern is for the community as well as for myself, is that we have high-speed internet, which I think that might not be literally the case at this time. So given, I was really encouraged by something that you had said about that telephone company that had expanded into fiber optics business. And is there any hint that Consolidated or some other companies might be interested in doing that
No,
in this part of New
Yeah.
Hampshire?
the company I was talking about is TDS, which bought up some of the local old legacy companies. Do you have any TDS in your town? So they're in quite a few communities scattered around in this area. They come into Farmington. They're now owned by a company that I think is based in Wisconsin. So the Kearsarge Phone Company and Union Phone Company are now all part of TDS. And they made a business judgment, which is the opposite of what the cable companies have been doing, which is putting fiber out to every home where they have telephone service. And the way they can do that, remember I mentioned that it's expensive to get on the telephone poles now? The law having to do with pole attachments, my kids think that I'm a nut because I get interested in pole attachment laws, but the laws on pole attachments that have been around and sort of evolving since the 1970s are essentially the stuff that's attached to the poles is on a, what do you call it, an eye bolt. So there's like a ring that screws into the pole, and they attach the cables to the ring. That thing that screws into the pole is the attachment. If you put one strand on that ring, or 100 strands, if you put fiber, which has incredible capacity, it's all one attachment. And in addition, if some folks have older systems, say a copper cable, if they overlash that or replace it with a different type of arrangement, it's still one attachment. So adding fiber to an existing attachment doesn't create a new attachment. So that's one way that Fairpoint, it also owns the poles, but it's not considered a new attachment when Consolidated puts new fiber out there. And that's how TDS was able to make the case economically to its investors that it was going to be cost effective to do this expensive build out. It's about $10,000 to $20,000 a mile to build fiber. And when you have to get pole attachments, it's definitely $20,000. So if you are an existing attacher like TDS on the poles and you just overlash with some cable, you're not paying for a new attachment on the poles, and you're not paying what's also very expensive, which is if other facilities need to be moved in order to make room for you, that cost of the telephone company or another internet service provider or somebody else who might be on the poles, or an independent telephone company like First Light or some of those folks, Bay Ring, who might be on the poles, if they have to move their stuff, the newcomer has to pay for them to move their stuff. And it's very expensive. They have to send out a truck and people, and it's a complicated process. And it happens one at a time. So one person moves their stuff, the other person moves their stuff, another person moves their stuff. So it takes a very long time. There are one of the proposals to try to speed the deployment of broadband, because the whole process of getting just on the poles is so long and expensive, is the so-called one-touch approach, which is, one company does it, it's a certified utility mover person, they do it for everybody, so it's no more every company bringing their own crew in there to do it. TDS, they seem to be making good on their promise to go everywhere in their telephone footprint, but because they only want to go where they have those pole attachments, they're not going anywhere outside their phone footprint.
But that would suggest that Consolidated would not have the higher level of cost that a new company would.
Right. So when Fairpoint proposed to purchase the Verizon phone system back in 2007, I think, was when they came to the state, That was one of the things, we represented a bunch of municipalities because many towns were very frustrated with Verizon's failure to maintain the poles. The poles are in terrible shape and often very unsafe. So municipalities were part of the process of reviewing the application. And one of the questions we asked was, are you going to, with your stuff on the poles already, do a video service similar to what TDS is doing now? Are you going to provide cable TV services or the equivalent? And at the time, Fairpoint said, that is our plan. We plan and hope to do that. They have struggled so massively. They went through bankruptcy shortly after they took over. They are hemorrhaging customers every year. They're losing people who are getting rid of their landline telephones. So their telephone business is really shrinking. Their internet service is becoming a bigger part of their business. They have shown no inclination to move forward on the video services. They did do a test trial in, I think, Kennebunk and maybe Kittery and Newington to see if their hybrid system of some fiber and some coaxial cable was robust enough to be able to carry video services, and they decided it was. But their whole system statewide is not uniform. So some areas are pretty robust and some are not. So they have declined to pursue video services. The telephone companies are the best, most likely candidate for a competitor to traditional cable because they already have their stuff on the poles. But Consolidated is not a financially robust company, and it's not going to get better for them.
Thank you.
So,
Okay.
right.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. I get to take that beautiful road back.
It's really beautiful in February.
Well, I'm sure the frost heaves will arise sometime and christen that new road with some new abandoned things. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
All right. Bruce Moose? Yeah. Yeah, Craig.
You know that we had a cable committee that Bill Nelson headed up.
Yep.
And I had given him years ago documents that I found in the archives that were very old. I would say it would have been the very first company that was talked to about providing cable.
So Bill might have these documents somewhere?
Yeah, the other thing is, I know that I've got a couple files in there, nothing recent, but I'm assuming you don't have anything in your four-drawer cabinet? And the other place for me to look is there's 2 boxes upstairs of selectmen records that would have ended in 2001. So that it all is from over there, and they got put in a box. And I just recently found them upstairs. I didn't even know they were there. And actually, I can go up there tonight and look and see if I see anything under cables, cable committee or anything.
I was trying to think when they sent out the letter to all the residents in town to try to get the cable company to come in. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
Really? But they had to have, I thought it was 10 houses per mile
Yeah.
before they were willing to come in.
I think they go 25 now per mile, which is difficult up here.
That's what she was saying. So I know that's been since I was here. I've been here 20 years.
Okay.
The other thing is, the 9/11 map that we have, I don't know the most recent one, shows every house with the house number on it.
I don't know, I've ever seen them at.
Right. They should be in there or in the assessor's office. The police, the way it used to work is they have a spiral-bound notebook that has it in miniature and in sections, so they know exactly what house they're going to on what road.
Who maintains that? Who maintains it?
It was 9/11 enhanced when they went to the 9/11 system, and it gets updated every once in a while. I'll look and see if I
I've
can
never
find
seen
it
one-
in
I've
there.
never seen one come in
But
here.
it occurred to me, I don't know if anybody, and it's one of the things I had hoped that the planning board would address in their survey, was do you have this service, this service, this service, or this service? 'Cause do we have any accurate, I mean, we talk about 109, how about Stoneham Road? Is all of Stoneham Road covered? I think before we do anything, we need to know exactly what houses have no, other than obviously Fairpoint, what houses don't have any access to charter.
There's some on Clark Road that don't.
Yeah, there's a couple on Clark.
And
I don't
we-
know about Stoneham, but I know where Moose ends and.
How about Gaffney, Garney? Is it on Garney or
Yeah,
Pike Brook?
I don't know Pike Brook, but I know all of Garney has it.
It stops early on Tumble now, but that gets pretty rural. I don't know about Stoneham, and I know the highest density area is right here on 109.
Yeah.
Because you get down there and you go to those camps also, those roads, Pinkham and
Yep.
Gates, and they go down to camps. So there's plenty of houses down there, structures, but we'll see where it goes. So we can do. So if you could find that agreement, that would be great. Like I said,
Yeah, I don't,
Or the map.
I tell you, I don't think there is one with Time Warner.
I told you what he told
I
me.
think there's one with Adelphi, and that's why, you know, I mean, Spectrum just came in the last 6 months.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why they're trying to get you to sign up, because they realize that there's nothing.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I told you what he told me about 6 years ago. You don't have one.
Yeah.
All right, let's get trucking here. So the minutes was drafted, were we okay? We're just gonna make a comment on the,
We have to make, I think we have to make a modification. Ed Mason, is he, hey Ed? Hello. I was questioning the classification on the road to summer camps.
Okay, what's your question?
I thought it was a class 6 road to summer camps and we maintain it.
No, it's from
Primo.
Primo's driveway to Camp Road is a class 5 to summer camps.
Class 5.
It's not a class 5, the class is class 5 to summer camps.
Okay, so
That's
you
its
need-
own separate,
That paragraph, that phrase.
you need that phrase in there, otherwise you maintain it year round.
There you go.
Right.
all right, so class 5 2 summer
And
camps.
you put summer camps in there, I think, right? So we're golden.
Yes.
So,
Repeat, I'll do it right. Class 5, section 2 summer camps. All right, then we're all set.
yep, that was, I was working with that. You did good. Then I'll make a motion, we accept the meeting minutes as presented.
Second motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any public comments? See none? Treasurer?
Not a lot. This week I worked on a few things. One of them was renewing the property and general liability policy. So going to the Primex portal and approving everything that's on the current policy. There is one snag, and that is that the bridge on Moose Mountain Road cannot be covered under our current policy because it's on the red list with the state of New Hampshire.
So does that mean that we don't have liability coverage, or?
Yes, that's what it means
Okay.
for that bridge.
So any loss
The only
arising out of that
bridge.
bridge, we would not have liability coverage for.
Right, the only bridge that's currently covered on the policy is the one on Clark Road.
Clark.
So, that's about it. I also did the workers' comp. They had delayed doing the 2017 workers' comp audit and finally got the portal working for that. So I also submitted that this week as well.
All right, you good?
Yeah.
All right, Rose, tax collector.
Okay, taxes for the first half of 2018 are due on Monday. The warrant was for $987,824, and as of today, we've collected $627,563, plus we had some people who paid last year for this year. And the balance owed right now is $331,212.90.
So Marilou reported the next 4 months, we're gonna spend 700,000, and we're trying to collect 900,000.
300 left, though.
So if we get all 900, we have 200 to operate on until December.
Yep. Okay.
And the town of Wakefield will take 160,000 of that,
Yeah. Well, don't forget the county.
and the county.
Well, I don't understand. That leads us to a very difficult position, and I don't understand why. I'll have to nose around, I don't understand why. We haven't been there in the past.
No,
So
I'll
some-
do a thing
Okay.
for the next meeting.
It's-
A thing.
It's not.
You like that?
I know what you mean, it's not computing. 200, and we have 160 away? There's some tilt someplace.
Plus the county's 100 and something thousand.
But we'll get that money
And
in.
whatever money we have, whatever money we have in the account still,
We have money in the account still.
so there's a buffer there. With money we still got in the hopper, and we took in 627 with another 300 outstanding. So, we're not gonna be down to 2 at the very end.
Oh, listen, what's in the bank, you know?
Yeah, but
Not enough?
yes, we have.
Okay.
There is a substantial amount on that
Yes,
side.
we do.
Okay, well then, okay,
I'll be moving money again this weekend.
okay. So that's the, okay.
All right, all set?
All set.
All set. All right.
So, did we get any response from planning board about the SRPC dues?
Haven't seen
Did we hear
anything.
anything
Haven't,
about that?
haven't seen anything.
Okay.
Okay.
So I do have the results on the water test that
Oh.
came back,
Oh,
and
yeah.
everything is within EPA standards.
Good enough for me.
I know, right? So here's a copy of that if you want.
It's very good water.
Thank you.
All the arsenic is growing where it needs.
Was there anything in there? Ed, was there anything in there?
No, but I can report when the planning board report comes up.
And we already paid this, right? Didn't we pay this upfront, or they're gonna?
No, that's gonna be invoiced.
Okay. But we knew the cost, it wasn't crazy.
90.
Yeah, it's $90, right? Oh, excellent. All right, good. Good news. Anything else?
That's it for me.
Planning board?
Well, to answer your question, at this week's planning board meeting, we did take an official vote not to pay the dues and also to encourage you to answer the letter, sign it, send it back. I believe with the same procedure we've been using now for at least 3 years.
Past few years, yeah.
So I don't know where that letter is at this point, but it should be here.
Okay.
And what else on the planning board? We're working on the master plan surveys. We had an informal discussion about a possible, not a lot line adjustment, a subdivision request. What else did we talk about? We talked about paying the dues, not paying the dues, talked about SRPC.
You're gonna have to watch the tape.
Yeah, no, I just,
We were both there,
Yeah.
we really were.
it was, well, the tail end of
Sorry, I
it was,
can't help you.
the tail end of it was trying to keep the meetings more brief and concise. I believe that was the last thing, so it was good.
Excellent, thank you. Code enforcement,
I have a lot of papers for signatures. Newest intent to cut for map 23, lot 6. Immediately highlighted your signature spots.
keep it up there.
Where is it?
109 at Brookfield line.
Really?
Yeah, let's see. Then I have a bunch, I have one, oh, there we go. One yield tax, that was the one that we had a typo on the last one.
Oh.
Got it straightened out.
All right, so it's a $30.08 yield tax for, this was for, grant.
Map 30, lot 3.
Thank you. Just looking at it, but
I
okay.
have that one memorized.
Oh, there it is. Yep, I'll let you take a look first. Unless you want to make the motion.
I'll make a motion that we sign this warrant for $30.08
For yield tax.
for yield tax.
I second motion. All in favor? Aye.
Next are timber tax warrants. Ready, Laurie? Map 9, lot 1, 10, 11, and 12. The next one is for map 26, lot 18. And you got 2 pages to sign on each.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Don't forget, yeah.
So this is a warrant,
Yep.
collect timber tax, $5,200 and change.
Would you like me to read out the amounts as I give her the?
I think the public would like to
Okay.
hear about that. And then we'll make a motion, this one's for, what did I say?
$1,700.
$1,700. The other one was $5,200. We'll make a motion at the end.
Yeah.
The next one is for map 4, lot 10, for $110.93.
We're getting smaller.
I'm sorry, I will put them in order next time. The next one is map 4, lot 8, for $45.02. Don't forget, there's 2 pages there.
So there are 2 pages.
Yeah. Each one has, you need to sign a warrant to collect the tax, but you also need to sign the sheet that shows you how it was figured. The worksheet. And the last one is for map 4, lot 11, for $102.02.
But this should get right from the computer, from the state, yes?
I input information on that.
And then they make the calculation for you. And you
No, I make the calculation.
then-
Well, the program that I have in the computer does it, I just fill it out. I guess
Well, the question is,
they,
are we sure, we're signing away, are we sure the numbers are right? How do you check the numbers? Does the machine do it for you?
they submit a handwritten report,
Yes?
and then a matrix is done on the lot itself, given 3 factors: the quality of the timber, the size of the lot, and the location of the lot. And that determines another factor which I input onto that form. And then I input all their tally numbers for the different species, and then it spits out a value based off from our region, which is central, based on the twice-a-year report that I get, which is determined by when they finish the cut. And all that is computed and spits out a worksheet.
So who owns the algorithms, the state or us? The software, who makes the calculation?
The state provided me with the software.
Okay, so it's not.
Right, and
that's what I was-
they're the ones, it's the state who sends out the average stump values for both northern New Hampshire, central and southern. And it's basically all done by the state. I just put the numbers in there. Don't you want to
Yes, thank you.
Well, then talk simply, will you?
Are we vulnerable? Yes.
Oh, it's been challenged plenty of times, and if you recall.
We had this,
And it seems to hold up since they do the work.
yeah, the last year we had.
Yep.
All right, who else want to make one motion for all four? Or what?
Did you get the,
I thought we gave one back.
This was in.
Oh, maybe
this was,
I'm-
gravel. No, this was in, so there'll be 1, 2,
It's
3,
five.
4, 5.
okay, Mary, and you have the maps and lots? Okay.
What's that?
That's the, we did that one already, that's for gravel.
Yeah, I need that
So I'll make a motion that we approve this warrant for these 5 lots as documented in the meeting minutes. Yes. You'll have the map and lots in the. Can I make that motion?
Okay. I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And I'm working on, I haven't completed yet, but I'm working on 2 more building permits. And when I get them, one is a house and one is a porch. So when I get them done, I'll let you know that it's done and where it's at.
Okey dokey. Road agent.
We put out over a pallet of coal patch. We got the concern, that area Mr. Evans was concerned about on Moose Mountain and others in the area.
Yeah.
And we've set up today, we set up the crack sealer, so we're gonna get a jump on the crack sealer for this year. I didn't get to start grading because I was fixing on the grader blade today, and so that'll be, hopefully, I don't know how this rain's gonna play out. We're supposedly gonna get some heavy rain on Thursday,
Yeah.
which might postpone it a little bit.
Okay.
So,
You saw the letter from Holden Engineering, they responded to my letter.
I did.
So they're still working on it.
Yeah.
I guess they hit some snags, but
I will call then, and now I will put in another request for an update. Where are they at, and what have they done, and, just to kind of keep
yeah,
stoking the fire,
but
so.
glad they at least responded.
Yep. Yep.
Heard from paving companies yet?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So I've met with the paving companies, and I told them I need the figures, because we measured and figured all areas and stuff, and they will actually have figures for me at the next meeting. And that was 3 options here at the town hall. Aprons to our dirt roads, reaffirm the pricing on Bryce Drive, an overlay on Pike Brook, and the hills on Tumbletown.
Okay.
And besides that, we removed some bricks and stuff out back too.
I get feedback today from someone on Pike. How do I want to say it? They indicated that, I said we're gonna repave it this year, and they said, why don't we make it dirt?
That's funny.
To some people.
Yeah, to me. Yeah.
The suggestion was we find out from the people on Pike whether they really want it paved now, or whether they'd be happy with the dirt road.
Obviously take into consideration their opinion, but as the rest of the residents in town have to fund the maintenance of these roads also, we need to make a wise decision on them.
But we save the capital. We don't buy paving. Right?
Sure.
Well, I brainstormed, maybe we brine it one year, get it ready to pave, but don't pave it. And then if we get feedback that, hey, this isn't working out, well, we're on our way, and if they're happy with it, we leave it. Well, there's only 5 residents on that road. 5. I guess I gotta take a ride down there.
Yeah, I thought
No,
there were
it's
more
more
than
than
5. Was it?
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Yeah, that's more than 5. That's a lot more.
11, and I think it's, don't quote me, but I think it's 0.3 of a mile.
Yeah.
Something like,
yeah.
it's not long, but the thing you have to understand is, paving keeps the water out off the road. It's impervious surface. It may be okay, and I know that particular road is busted up pretty bad, but as a general rule, you may have a road that travels nicely in the springtime during mud season when it's paved, and you take that same road and grind it up and let the water sit in it. You might be in for a surprise as to how it reacts to that condition. Okay.
Were you able to get over to Bryce to do some measurements there to see if that's feasible?
22 feet from the pole to the opposite side of the road. So if you go from the pole, 18 feet of travel way, that leaves you 4 feet of shoulder with the pole being right on the edge of the pavement on that side.
What if we shift the pavement over? That's what I was getting at.
Then you get into the same issue of, we're supposed to keep our storage, we're supposed to have the pavement off the right-of-way enough to have our snow in the right-of-way off the pavement.
So from the pole to
From the
the
pole to
other,
the other side,
20
our right-of-way on the other side
22
is
feet.
22 feet.
18 feet of blacktop,
Right, and that's,
that leaves 6 feet.
no,
that leaves 4
that
feet.
leaves 4 feet.
So where do you put the 4 feet?
Okay,
You're right.
you need shoulders.
Yeah.
All right, I just had to at least let me explore the issue. Okay, well, I guess that leads me to next question. Have we heard from Eversource?
I was going to call them, but I figured I'd wait until after tonight's meeting.
Okay.
So I will be happy to call them in the morning and see if I can get an update from them. And if I get, the cold shoulder again, if you will, maybe we need to,
I have another name of a lady over there if you don't get your response.
well,
And then, question, if we have the pole moved, who's paying for us or Eversource?
well, in the past, we haven't had to pay for it. It's been brought to my attention that they have, and this I find quite comical, that was put in with a pole license and they have a license for it. I haven't asked them to produce it, but because they have a license and it was okay to go in there where it is, it would be up to us to pay for having the pole moved.
Okay. And then the trees, we'll have to get a contractor in there.
So I wonder if it would be helpful, because if it would be helpful if the Board of Selectmen write a letter
Well, that's what I
To
was
the-
suggesting.
to Eversource requesting this, because it's all been verbal,
Yep.
or we have the attorney make a request
Well, give me that one last phone call tomorrow and see what he has
to
to
help move
say.
it along, because up to this point, it's all been verbal.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else?
I'm good.
Thank you.
Conservation.
No, and they're gonna skip the meeting in July.
Okay. Heritage.
So August 4th, just another reminder, is the town barbecue this year. Rick Surrette does the barbecue for us, and the Heritage Commission will organize the rest of the dinner. The other thing we discussed at our meeting last week was that 2019, if you look at when the town was organized, is the 225th anniversary of when the town was formed or organized,
Charter, whatever.
incorporated. So I've been looking back through some of the documents on the bicentennial, which was in 1994, and I think they had some wonderful ideas. We will probably come up with some programs for next year, I know we will, as well as other things. So stay tuned. Oh, I'd like to see about putting a banner, possibly, between the two buildings that says, not for winter time, but for now and up through fall and then spring next year, that announces the celebration, or put it close to the road or something. Would that be okay with the selectmen? I can run a design by you first.
We have that.
That'd be good, because I don't know where you'd attach it.
I don't even.
Okay, guys, want
I'll
to
think of it.
take a look?
Okay, so I'd like to come up with, I'd like to get that out fairly quickly, because we will be doing quite a few things. They did a number of things back in 1994 and had some good ideas, so we're going to see what we can do to come up with new stuff like that. That's all.
Okey-doke. Cemetery trustees.
They're still working on that.
The Veterans Memorial.
And I think
The
they're
flagpole, I have a bill for the flagpole.
ready to get the flagpole installed.
Yeah, that's because Rick was telling me that.
So they asked us to,
I have a bill for it.
yeah.
Okay.
And there's a new cemetery graveyard trust for a graveyard that's basically been lost for years up on Camp Road on Mrs. Leclerc's property, Mr. and Mrs. Leclerc's property. It's going to be called the Churchill Children's Graveyard because there's 5 children that are buried there that were children of Joseph T. Churchill. Some descendants.
Did you find it, or did you talk to Leclerc's about that?
No, not yet, no. I gotta send them a letter.
Other boards or committees? Nothing to do with the
Grant review.
grant review committee. Thank you. Couldn't think of the name of it. Did you guys meet since then? Or?
I'll just give you a brief synopsis of what we've accomplished so far. We're still working on the flow that's going to be used from the point that a department head or an elected official wants to apply for a grant, how it's going to move through the system and through our committee, how the report's going to look. We've already given you the report for the small grant from Fish and Game, which I'm going to ask you to give me an update on that in a minute. And the one we're working on presently is the local emergency operation plan. It's a New Hampshire Homeland Security grant to compile the emergency management plan. So that's what we're presently working on. It's very complicated. It's a federal grant, so there's this federal circular, it's called, which we have to go through, which is supposed to be very easy. We have to go through it.
Any update on the Fish and Game grant? Last time we talked, it was going to be submitted.
No, we're waiting till the money got
No.
Wait, I'll update.
Okay, thank you.
What you're asking is, are we in the queue? Have we missed the boat? No. The application is, I believe it's in
Was submitted.
Karen Bordeaux's
It was submitted.
inbox, and they're waiting for the funding to
Okay.
fill the account. So,
Okay. Well, you mailed it, but we don't know that.
Oh, I think of it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, my update I'm asking you is, what are your next steps on that? Are you going to wait for Tim Nolan, or is he going to go ahead? Is he going to wait for it to be, we already know that he has to receive and it has to be accepted and approved before he does his work. So I must have answered my own question.
Yes, we're waiting to get the grant money and then give Nolan the green light.
So that's the holding pattern we're in right now.
That's correct.
You said you gave us the report?
I gave it to you on, it was in a black folder. I put it right there last time.
Okay, just,
I have another copy of it.
guess I'll look at it, you know, just to see what the report says. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, some old business, townhouse maintenance plan for the handicap ramp. Where is it? Do you want to? There was a few questions that we wanted answered. I think we got answers on everything. The first question about a warranty, and product has a 3-year warranty for defects. He went on to say that he's never had to apply for it in 16 years that he's been installing them. The service warranty comes from Level Ramping Solutions. I offer to return at no cost for any kind of adjustments, re-leveling for a year after installation. And we questioned whether or not there was another pattern for the non-skid, and from what I understand, it is just a horizontal grid, so you can't slip up and down. So that is currently what we've got. He's able to ascertain that he has 87% reclaimed materials, so it'll cut down on our cost pretty substantially. So the total bid, or estimate, is $5,050. And the plans are
What is it for?
a new handicap ramp.
Oh,
It's that aluminum style.
Does that include removing the old one too?
Yes. Labor, demolition, cleanup, haul away, existing wooden ramp, porch. Any additional work needed to tear out, i.e. cladding or rot remediation, is not included. So the delivery of the ramp would be here, and then all the materials for $5,050. So I'm gonna make a motion that we accept this estimate and green light it.
Second?
Okay, any further discussion?
Could it be done around August 4th? Or,
We're done soon.
It should be quick.
will it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he wants to do it.
yeah, he can start pretty quick.
As long as we have a ramp on August 4th, I'm
We
good.
should be good.
We should tell him. We should tell him, need it done by August what?
Okay.
First.
First, you're right. You're right. You're right. You're right.
All right, so no further discussion then? All in favor? Aye.
You want me to, or you want to?
I don't care, I'll give him a call.
Okay, good. This is all, we know who's doing it.
I'll take that. Dun, 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 dun. Laurie's been working diligently on pole licensing agreements. Where do we stand? We have the notification, and you just finally got all the addressees, right?
All the paperwork is complete and ready to be mailed out. The issue is the addresses that we were supplied are outdated, so I worked off of the Secretary of State's website to try and get updated addresses, but it's not the easiest task in the world. So the question is, do we want to run with what I was able to find, or do we want to still wait for the attorney for an updated list? I did call Wakefield just to verify, see if I could confirm any of the addresses that I found. They only notified 2 companies.
Okay. When's Jay coming back?
Beginning of July.
That's what,
5th.
when is wait? I'd rather do this once instead of, doesn't make sense. We're not gonna get them much further ahead. And it gives us enough time for the hearing, so.
So, we have letters ready to go. We might have to modify the addresses on the letter itself, as well as address them.
The envelope.
Okay.
All right, so why don't we just wait until Jay gets back, and hopefully she can get us an up-to-date list.
So, you or me calling Jay?
What do you want to call Jay about?
The updated list. Or you think she's
She's
gonna,
on vacation.
when she comes back, do you think it's gonna, do you think, I didn't see, did the mail say she's gonna just give us a new list?
I can follow up with her via email and
Please.
ask her upon her return to supply us an updated list.
That'd be good.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, that Jay must have more current lists and we'll,
As long as we get one. We know she's on vacation, we're gonna get a list, we don't know.
well, when she gets back on the 5th, we can head her up. All right, attic update. I'm gonna go look at buying the shelving in the very near future and look for hopefully one day that's not 90 degrees and go and start cleaning it out. But I also need Rick around, so make sure his truck's available, so once that all syncs up, we'll get the attic done. On a side note, because that kind of dovetails in with the high school volunteers, I had 2 yards of mulch shipped over from Dave Gattadaro, so we'll work on getting that spread sooner rather than later. Town standard contract. I've been able to pull some decent contracts off of the municipal side and some stuff I have as well. So I got one kind of a draft more than halfway done. So I'll get that over to Laurie and get it on letterhead and make it look pretty. All right, propane bids. Where'd they go? You got them? I know. So we got 4 proposals. One is not worth.
Well, that's citizens generated, they must have watched the tape and tried to help out.
Yeah, well, it's $2 a gallon plus a $50 fee, so not really a good one, right? We get Down East Energy with the lowest per gallon rate of $1.39.9. But the catch there is we need to commit to buying 3,000 gallons. So that's not gonna work. We like the per gallon price, but it's a little, unless they can bend on the amount we have to buy, that's just not gonna work.
Does this decision need to be made tonight?
Well, the problem is, these are all like exploding offers, so some of them are by noon tomorrow, we need to make a decision, or they redo the
I was
proposal.
gonna bring my spreadsheet on how much we've used so far,
Yeah, I guess, right?
over 2,000.
Yes, and then we had the one spot delivery from the, remember the spot delivery? So that took the 2,700 about. That was like a 500 gallon delivery.
Yeah,
So I said 3,000 is just a little bit on the high side.
it is, because typically we don't use,
Especially with our tanks being full right now, our tank's gotta be pretty stocked up.
Yeah, but that's what we used, that's what was delivered.
yeah.
So,
Okay,
that's the number.
okay.
It's close.
Then we got Ryan's at $1.56.9. See, here it says based upon 3,000 gallons, I can offer you this contract, so they're looking at 3,000 gallons as well.
That was in the letter that I sent out for request, that's what we.
Oh, that's what we base it on?
Yeah.
So do we think we're gonna, because if we don't,
Well, they don't have any conditions on it.
not that I can say.
I don't think. Well, it depends, we got the meters going now. They're spinning. They have a contract? I'd like to go back to White Mountain and see if we can't get them to come down. White Mountain's a little, what's the spread?
And last but not least is White Mountain, who we currently have, and we've had a good relationship with them the past couple. They're $1.67. So between them and Ryan's, that is, you're roughly 9 cents apart.
$270.
So do you want to see if Laurie can call and charm them and see if they will drop their price just a little bit? So we can keep with them?
Yes, yes.
And if they'll drop it down to even $1.60, we go with them? We'll stay with them, I should say.
We're not meeting again, huh?
That's why I say I can make that motion, that if we can get White Mountain to drop down to even $1.60,
They don't give us a contract. I mean,
no, we would just stay with them.
The other two have all kinds of conditions on us.
Mhm.
And we have to sign contracts and. So my bias is try to get White Mountain to come down in price
Yeah,
and still go with them. I mean, we don't have the contracts. We're not gonna be on the hook for 3,000 gallons.
I know.
And the Rhymes contract, take a look, there's all kinds of pages.
I saw, I was looking at it.
I'd rather not sign the contract. The risk is if we spend if we use all 3,000 gallons, 3 times 9.
Yeah, this is just, with White Mountain's nice, it's just a lock-in rate, it's not, you know,
And if we can better it, excellent.
you wanna give it a try?
Sure.
All right.
So what are we gonna do, make a motion on this, or she say yes?
All right. That's the one.
I'll make a motion that we go with White Mountain for next year's propane, hoping and watching the tape. And we asked Laurie to try to better the price.
What if they won't better the price, do we still go with it?
I would.
Okay.
That's my motion. You can second if you want to. You can second it if you want to.
No, I'm just, so 3,000 gallons, let's say it's even it's a 7 cent.
It's 9, it's 9 cents, that's $270, 3 times 9.
All right, I'll second the motion.
That's the risk.
That's what I'm.
But for that, we don't have a contract, we're not on the hook for 3,000 gallons.
Okay, I'll second the motion. Any other discussion? All in favor? Okey dokey. Town maintenance contractor.
I put that on there.
Yeah.
We got stuff that's gotta get done, it's not getting done.
Small one.
Small stuff. We keep asking Ed to do it, it's not fair, it's not road agent stuff.
Can take some off the roads, which we'd rather have the roads being taken.
That's right. I mean, I think we've got a bench next door that's still busted. We've got whiteboards to put up, it's not a lot of stuff. We've got a hand up, yes?
I have a friend who retired last year from that business, and I'll see if he wouldn't want just a little bit of work. So he doesn't live too far, he's in Maine, but it's just out 109, just over the line a little bit. So it might be something he's interested in. I didn't even think of him the last time you were asking about it.
Let's see if he's interested in how much he would want. It's a short list, but it keeps coming up, it's
Well,
we're not getting done.
if it's something he's willing to do, he'd be the kind of guy that you could just email and say, hey, gotta do this at some point, and he'd come over and do it.
We didn't insulate the trap in the schoolhouse yet.
Yeah.
That froze last year. I mean, the list just goes on, it's not big stuff.
Right.
So, all right, thank you, Ed.
All right, that sounds good.
I'll text him right now.
All right,
I got stuff.
okay, what stuff you got?
I want to thank you for doing the rugs. They look good. You came in Sunday and you cleaned the rugs here, they came out very, very nice, I think. So thank you.
They're better, no problem.
I haven't seen any contracts coming in for painting on the townhouse yet.
I called Adam yesterday, and his voicemail was full.
And I talked to a paint contractor who said she would get it to us by the 1st. Okay, what are we gonna do with Miller, the attorney?
This whole franchise agreement, it seems far more complicated and risky if we don't do it right. So I'm inclined to see if we can get her on, like, either do we want to saddle up with us being in Tamworth, or do we just take her on as a limited basis? I'd rather cost share with us being in Tamworth if at all possible.
So would I.
We can dilute the cost and ride on each other's coattails. I imagine there's was gonna be some sort of retention agreement that we'd have to execute and whatnot.
Why, if you don't, I'll try to call Tamworth and Ossipee
Yeah,
and see what their thoughts are on it.
okay.
And then we can get back together in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then we can reach out to Catherine and see what kind of agreement we would have to sign with her. I imagine there's some sort of, some sort of retention deal.
Yeah, when I went to their website, this is one of their areas that company specializes in. We should tell Laura? Do we tell Laura? I don't know if Laura does this work or not.
You'll probably give her a heads up, just so she hears that there's another lawyer working with Brookfield. It's not that we replace her, it's just specifically on this franchise agreement. I'll give her a call.
Okay.
I'll give her
So
a
now, and I want to call Tamworth and Ossipee. Okay, I can do that. Should I keep going?
Go for it, yeah.
We've got a coffee Saturday?
Oh, God.
Oh, all right.
Don't sleep. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, that's fine,
Okay,
because I have to drop Aiden off for work and all that jazz, so.
8 to, so it's on the website.
8 to 10.
Try to get the sign out there. Maybe tomorrow afternoon I'll get it out there. We'll see if I can drag it. The foot.
I know.
Maybe tomorrow I'll be able to drag it. So that's done.
If you need help, give me a call, I can come do it.
We can do it tonight.
I can do it tonight.
Could we unlock it and, the sign's already made up. We didn't modify the sign.
I have my keys.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, I'll get it over.
And what else? Rug? Guess that's my list.
Okay. We don't need to do the non-public, that's a non-issue, right? All right, so any other?
Oh, yes, there is. We have a letter from us.
Yeah, I was gonna do that with mail, but you wanna do it?
Oh, okay.
Well, let's just hit it now. The town of Ossipee, I think we've heard and we watched, at least I did, I watched their meeting when they were having major heartburn over their school budget and how it's impacted their tax rate. So they sent out a letter to a total of 5 towns, include Brookfield. So I'll read it really quick. Dear Board of Selectmen, there has been a fair amount of response generated by discussion on the impact of the town of Ossipee we will see in the local education tax as a result of the $1.5 million budget increase, of which Ossapee's portion is $900,000 or $1.33 per thousand. This year alone, the local education tax will double the amount, as we as the selectmen have worked diligently over the past 4 years to decrease the town's portion of our tax rate. Upon request, we have investigated the methodology in calculating Ossapee's share of the school district budget. This likely needs to be updated, as the process for our town has not changed in 55 years. We are asking each town in the Governor Wentworth Regional School District, would you be in favor of establishing an actual budget committee with representation from each town within the school district to provide financial oversight and review of the proposed budgets? We kindly request that you respond in writing no later than July 2nd. Thank you. I think it makes sense to strengthen numbers, trying to do this piecemeal, is not going to get us anywhere, but you start getting many of the towns put together.
I don't know whether he's actually trying to get, an elected budget committee or an advice. We should meet with him and see what they have.
Yeah, because and they have this letter went out to Brookfield, Effingham, New Durham, Tuftsboro, and Wolfboro.
So I think we should say yes and find out what's going on. I don't know whether it's going to be appointed, elected, what the RSA say about budget committees, but we don't want to kibosh it, so let's participate.
Okay. Laurie, can you write a letter to them just saying that the town of Brookfield, the selectmen are interested in meeting and
Working with me.
working with one of the switches? Something along those lines.
And I called the business district because I found out that the impact has been detailed for other towns. Ours is projected to go up 67 cents, the school board tax rate. That's their projection now.
And what did it go up last year? Was it a significant rise last year?
I'm sorry, I don't remember. It really depends upon,
It was over $1.
Oh, this is the one that Jessica used to do.
Right, right.
it depends upon the population. That's what gets you. And I think that's what got us up here, right? They just hit a shift. And it could just be a
I just
shift.
saw this form today. So how about if, so we probably need someone to call Rod Wood and see what his recommendation is. I just came across a copy of one of these forms today in my office at home. I think it was voted, I think it indicated that we would not be using the PA 28
That's what I
form
thought we did, but,
in 2019, but it probably would be good to check with Rod
Rod.
Wood.
okay, I'll email that. And just so everyone knows what the heck we're talking about, there's a form that municipals, that
Towns.
that these are, this is our annual request to municipalities, that's the word, to determine whether the municipality will be utilizing PA 28. It's a form in order to do taxpayer inventory. So we will go ahead and we will look to contact our assessor just to make sure that we're doing the right form of equalization for the town.
Do we have to do anything with that request from SRPC? We're not gonna spend that money.
We're not going to spend that money now. So
Want
we're
to
going
make a motion on it?
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we're not gonna send the dues to SRPC.
a second motion. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay. No money approved. Okay. All right. So before we do bills and checks, any other public comments? Diane?
Regarding your motion that you just voted on, the planning board did recommend that, or suggest that you sign the letter indicating that you're declining to pay.
Right, right. And Laurie has that letter, so that's why we're going
Thank you.
to.
We're gonna sign it?
Yeah, we'll send a letter, but we're not going to send money. Right?
That's fine.
Yeah. Because that's what Ed had said earlier, that the recommendation will be signed, but not pay the dues.
That was the motion,
Yes.
but still, there's no statutory requirement to do that. But we can't see any harm in signing it.
I agree. It just would seem petty for us not to sign
Someone said there's a new person in charge there,
There's a new executive
new
director.
director, and we're starting maybe on a new foot with them, so let's sign the letter and see where it goes, right?
I had a comment to go back to the school district letter, the letter from OSFI about the school district.
that.
Has there ever been a time in this area history where the selectmen of the area towns have gotten into one room?
Kind of an enclave.
Have they ever done that? Have you ever known them to ever do that?
No, I've met privately with Wakefield, grab a cup of coffee just to chat with them on the issues, but I don't think we've ever formally publicly noted a meeting of any different selectmen.
Because this is a huge issue, the school taxes. This could be a good first time, and we're throwing this out there, to have some type of a meeting of all the selectmen of the affected areas in the district to have a discussion about this. A common sense, calm discussion about school taxes and what we can do, because it's affecting everyone. And if you speak to individuals in the property-rich towns and explain to them the issue, most will say they agree. But are they willing to make changes that'll make them pay more? Probably not, but there has to be something that can be done. And I think if we did get together, not just by letter, but actually do face-to-faces, I think we could actually do something.
Yeah, I think that's what OSIP seems to be asking for us to all get together, you know, and even if we're on a rotating basis where we select one member to be our delegate
Right.
at that, then, you know, but I think for the first meeting, at least, you know, I think all three of us should go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other public comments? No, seeing none, do we have any other mail? There wasn't much mail to go through. That's all we need.
Well, we can sign these later, any invoices we should read. Don't want to check, brother.
No, just a couple.
You didn't sign this one. did you?
Oh, I can't.
Let's get that out of here tonight, that's, what are both going on here tonight? And the bills are, you gonna read them, want me to read them?
You want me to read it?
Yeah, you can read, anybody can read, they stick in my fingers.
Okay. So Ocean State Job Lot, we have a bill owed to Brian Robisheau for cleaning the office carpeting for $46.98. And a bill owed to Marilou Maclean for lunch for 7 people, 6 plus officials plus the auditor, and postage mail documents to the New Hampshire P-dip, so a total of $42.41.
What'd you guys have, filet mignon?
Yeah, we did. I only charged $5. The bill was higher.
Kidding. I heard from Virginia, she really liked her lunch that day. She was pleasantly surprised.
Staples, $170.71. We owe Avatar $123.75 for the tax bills. And Carroll County Register of Deeds, we owe $21. To George Nick, we owe for copies L-chip at Registry of Deeds, $25. Eversource, we owe $16.23 for one, and $115.84 for the other one. Flagworks Over America 2015 is the flagpole for the News Town Cemetery, $1,780. To the Department of Agriculture, Markets and Food for the dog licenses collected this year, $231.50. Tri-County CAP is requesting half of their appropriation, so $2,000. The total appropriation was $4,000. Metro Municipal Group is $192.28. And Dave Electric did annual maintenance on the generator at $150. And that's all.
Right. Good. Wait.
Oh, you know what item I wanted to bring up? I forgot. You know the panic buttons that all the...
We should talk about, yeah, we should talk about privately on that, yes.
Okay.
The security issue, yes. So,
Just cast my own.
what do we have, what do we? Okay. Is that, see, we're starting to get hit with the Eversource charge.
Well, yeah, because that's the new lawsuit.
Well, how do we get out of that?
I don't think we're quite in a position to get out of that one yet.
We want to settle. The last time
Last time we bailed out,
we took 3 years before we,
I know, do we have the money to pay if...
why don't you talk to her, when you're going to talk to her? Who does this? I guess it's not Jenny. When you talk to Laura, why don't you see what other towns are going
Who's
through?
TAM? As far as the timekeeper goes, I don't know who
I
that
know
is.
who it is.
All right, I'll ask Laura. That's it.
Talk to her about, because last time we lost a lot of money on that.
Oh, yeah, we would have wasted money.
And I got feedback, a lot of feedback, believe it or not,
I believe it.
about voting locations.
people wanna come back here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here too?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. Along that line, I have another request. I would like for the selectmen at the town coffee this Saturday to please take down the voting booths in the schoolhouse. Please. I said please.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll wait for Rick to come back too.
Yeah. Quick,
So I want to resolve that is we have to tell Virginia where we're voting because she puts it on the form she fills in. So-
I think we gotta come back in here.
I agree. So let's, if we agree, we'll tell Virginia we're coming back here.
Because it just flows here better. That was
We
the,
tried it, it didn't work.
no.
Okay.
Real quick, Marilou, the flag thing, does that come out of the budget or does that come out
It's a
of?
budget thing. Oh,
What line item does that come out of?
It was-
oh, we put it in the budget
it
this
was in
year.
the budget.
Okay.
Thanks.
No, you don't need to go, Marilou.
No, I'm sitting here.
I can look.
I make a motion, we accept the bills as read on the record by Marilou.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The bills are.
Thank you.
And we're voting back, we're gonna move voting back here. We'll see Virginia Saturday, tell her.
Yeah.
She's gonna fill forms out.
We had 18, it's in the regular town budget, $1,800 for the flagpole.
Okay, I wasn't sure, I didn't know if we had a warrant, I didn't know if we had a trust account, I didn't remember where that was from. Okay,
Anything else?
that's fine.
Sorry, you're running.
No, anything else, are we good? All right, meeting adjourned.